Ready to go? Okay. Great. Good evening, everybody. Please be aware if you are attending this meeting, our meetings are recorded for future viewing, and we are privileged to gather on the traditional territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw. We'll call the meeting to order and ask if there are any additions or amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, can I have a motion, please, to accept the agenda as presented? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. For petitions and delegations, we have with us tonight Gord Oppen from the Gatehouse Theatre to speak to us about a waterfront bandstand. Welcome, Gord. I'll remind you that you've got 10 minutes for your presentation, please.
Check. Is that okay? Can you hear that? I can't hear that, but can you hear that? Back there?
Probably be just a touch louder, please.
Yes. Check.
They're going to do it. Yeah.
Check. Is that good? Okay. The people that are zooming in maybe or what have you, check. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
May I give you a handout for these slide sets? So you're not going to recklessly read ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have to be quite brief, and you probably have an inkling of what I've come to ask about. But before I start, I wanted to congratulate you all on last night's effort. I know that was a culmination of a ton of work, and most people wouldn't recognize how much work that was for you all, but I do. So if nobody told you today, and I'm sure they didn't, thanks for your service to the town.
Thank
Great,
you.
I'm grateful. So as the slide might suggest, I've come to you asking for some encouragement and wind beneath my wings to try and accomplish this. Okay. Connor, can you hit a button there for me? I'd like to describe to you what this Thrive grant is, and that was for me, the nucleus anyway of trying to see if this might fit us. Why now? Stakeholders that I've identified and perhaps an opportunity to hear of others that I'm not aware of yet. A quick overview of where the funding might come from, a very preliminary budget, some design considerations or options for us to consider, and then a kind of a call to action, if you will. I came about this grant about a week and a half ago, and I got really excited. And I thought, this is perfect. And then as I understood it more, then I discovered that it expired in the summer of 2021. I phoned Lynn Robert, who's the CEO and the chair of ICE-T, and I described this idea of a public performance space in our waterfront. And I was fortunate. I got probably an hour on the phone with Lynn Robert. And what I was encouraged about more than anything was that she had said, you know, this notion of what you're trying to accomplish with a performance space and what it means to downtown as a gathering place and one more incentive to drive to support the businesses in the downtown core. She says, you know, we've given out a lot of this money so far, and none of these actually match it closer than what you've suggested to me. So it encouraged me that with the proper proposal and the right amount of due diligence, we would be eligible for this $50,000. Now, I recognize on a capital project like a band shell, even though in my mind I think it's modest and I'm going to put it up like the deck of a house, the money just goes so fast, right? And 50,000 is quite clearly not enough to accomplish it, but I'll talk to that in a minute. But that was the most encouraging point, was to find out that this idea and its contribution to the town better matched the Thrive grant than many that they've given it already, including the one in Hardy. So why now? I guess why now? The biggest reason is the grant is available, and the caution from Lynn Robert was that we love the idea, Gord, get cracking on it. You know, if you even want to send us a draft, do that and we'll help you work your way through it. But there's still gas in the tank on that grant, but don't delay, because it's not going to last. But it's also timely in the sense that on the heels of last night's OCP and the culmination of all that work, I know you had a legal requirement to get that document done, but now it's the platform for all of the things you do, hope and dream to help evolve the town. And this slide of yours actually kind of captured a bunch of the things that I think were some of your objectives and goals, some of those things you wanted to nurture. And I believe that this idea of a public gathering space and a performance space hits on almost every one of them. I think it talks to almost every one of the things that you had identified was near and dear to you and the health and the future of the township. The stakeholders that I think have begun to identify as, of course, yourself and the theater. The chamber, who would, the chamber members would be the beneficiaries of any activity we can do to drive business downtown and make downtown more vibrant. Vancouver Island Tourism funds Iced Tea in part, but they also have another grant vehicle that may be available to us. And I have a conference call with Kyla Egan on Friday about that. The Harbor Advisory Committee, obviously, and the whole Harbor team, and of course, Iced Tea. I think without being too bold, after that discussion and trying to fully understand the objectives of the Iced Tea grant, I really think it's within reach. If I'm successful in that, I'd like to approach council and I'd like to see if it would be an appropriate place to apply some of the grant and aid COVID relief funding. You know me, and you know that I can be fairly effective in fundraising on something that's near and dear to me. So this is my commitment to you, is that I believe that with a healthy investment of shoe leather, I can generate those last two amounts. Take a little while. And, on a project like this, I don't suspect, it's slow to build. And if we were to get further along, would we even break ground this year? I don't know. I think the materials will be expensive, the cost of wood and everything else. But I'm also hopeful that we can approach some of our biggest employers and business people in town to help offset the cost of the lumber and the trades and the ground prep. Each one of those categories has an opportunity to approach our business leaders and see, would you like your company associated with this project? Would you like to be on a plaque for the next 30 years that says you contributed to this? Lynn Robert made a comment that the success of our grant will be determined in a large part by our ability to get all hands on deck. Meaning, will the chamber endorse it? Will the business community support it or sign a petition or write a letter? Will some of our business leaders, contribute or reduce the cost of materials or labor to make it happen? So without being too bold, I think I have enough gas in the tank to accomplish that with your help. I've put in a line there for art installation because that's another component of it. It's not just a facility, but it should be something that's of interest to the tourist population as well. And so we have an opportunity here to engage perhaps a First Nations component to that. Next one, if you may. So my ask is to see if I can get your approval to keep applying energy to this. Because it's not going to go anywhere unless you endorse the idea in some fashion. There's a million questions about, the design, the detail, the ground prep, a whole bunch of things. But first and foremost, does this idea talk to and support some of the goals that you as a council have decided, as you try and craft the future of Port McNeill? Does this align with some of the things you want to do? But if you've given me that green light, and it's not much more than that, it's not much more than to say, Gord, we endorse the idea, and if you can pull all these other things together, we're with you. And with that, then I will go and secure all the funding and apply for the grants with help from everybody. And then at some point, let the community know that we're on the way, we're on the right track. That's all I have, but I hope there might be a few questions that I can hopefully answer.
Okay, thank you. Open up the questions from council to Gord. Go ahead, Councillor Mitchell.
Through the chair, where did you envision this thing being?
I believe in front of the visitor center, somewhere on the grass. There's a question about which way the wind blows at which time of the year. And I think for the summer, you know, where the wind comes from the mouth of the harbor towards Alert Bay, it suggests that if that was the time we would get the most utilization out of it, then you would face it at the edge of the boat ramp pointing towards Alert Bay. Even though aesthetically it might look prettier the other way, you'd be kind of right into the wind for the summer months when you'd likely utilize it the most.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Gord, to be frank, like, what's in it for the theater here? I'm trying to, you selling tickets or what's going on?
No, it's a great question. I think it's a really good question. What's in it for the theater? We think it's a logical extension of the theater because we are a performance space. We're our Port McNeill performance space. And this seems to be a logical extension to be able to help find and locate and encourage acts to participate on it. We see it being used for every Sunday's Crafters Market and Canada Day and Family Day and First Nations Day and things like that. And what's in it for us? I think the best answer to that question is that we have the ability to apply for the grant and get it. You can't just be a concerned citizen and go for this ICE-T grant. You've got to be a society or a nonprofit group. And that's why it caught our interest. It has the endorsement of the board. We think it's a nice extension of the theater. And we envision things like theater in the park on a nice warm summer night, or music, or the crafters and acoustic-y kind of folks for Farmers Market Day. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that's how we got to that thinking. Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Okay, thank you very much. As you know, we don't make a decision in the evening, or like the evening that you present.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to speak, like Councillor Cole is a recreation liaison, and
Yes.
he'll be able to let you know what kind of things council would be looking for in order for us to even get to make some sort of a decision.
Okay, understood. Well, I figured there'd be a whole bunch of to-dos that would come out of this for me to kind of qualify. Yeah. Okay, thanks for your time.
Great, thank you very much. All right, item 4A, we have the minutes of the March 3rd, 2022 special meeting of council. Are there any corrections? And if not, can I have a motion to accept or to adopt the minutes? Moved. Seconded by? Oh, second. No, that's okay. Oh, and all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay. Next, we have item 7A. It's a report to council from Public Works. What's your pleasure, council? We do have our Public Works manager here this evening to answer any questions. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Yes, I had a question about on the second page, third bullet from the bottom, regarding the town office backup power and replacement of wind turbine. Just had a couple questions. Julian can speak that. Thank you, Julian. So I guess my understanding is we had a wind turbine and there was some sort of insurance claim. And I guess I'm asking how that plays into the decision for the solar panels.
Yeah, okay. So basically the compensation is not going to be anywhere near what we were anticipating, just because the damage was a lot less. So all the infrastructure, internal infrastructure, the battery bank, the inverter panels, all of the electrical sustained no damage. So it's just the turbine itself. The fact of the matter is that we were sort of contemplating different green energy, and I think solar panel really lends itself to that application as opposed to a mechanical application like the wind turbine. which was quite high in maintenance.
So under this circumstance, can we just like pocket the insurance money, or do we need to spend it on something
No.
that replaces it?
No, good question. We can actually, there are options. We can actually take the money and not do anything, which is probably going to be about 75% of the claim. It'll be a reduction for sure. But the insurance company are quite amicable to the idea of us doing something in kind, like with what the, is going to be replaced. So green power qualifies.
And for my benefit, maybe councils, can you elaborate on what this battery bank powers in the town office? And what I'm getting at is, could that battery bank just normally be plugged in every day and the power goes out, and how long are we good for? So I'm really sort of wondering if there's sort of a long-term payback on the solar panels, or is it, and I guess the other fact for council is maybe we're anticipating a change of use of that building, so
Yeah,
a couple
for sure.
questions there.
Yep, yeah, you bet. So basically it's a 3 kilowatt system, so it can't power the entire building. So it's, when it was constructed, it's basically powering very select circuits. So certain computers are powered up, the kitchen, bathrooms, certain lighting, the ESS area for battery, for powering up the radios, that sort of thing. The idea is that now we have that EOC trailer that we can plug that in as well. So to power up exactly the same as what the turbine used to power up. So the EOC trailer would be plugged in. That's like in the works right now as an alternative way of actually powering up the battery bank that powers up part of the building.
So when the power is on, I think the second half to the question was when the power is on, it charges that battery bank.
Correct.
And how long is that battery bank good for?
It all depends on the usage. Obviously, if nobody's making tea or coffee, it's going to last a lot longer. But I mean, if we're frugal with our power consumption, we can get 6-8 hours out of it.
A day, basically.
Sorry to get technical. So is the power from the windmill or soon to be, or whatever, the solar panels?
Yeah.
Was that power being used day by day, or is it just used in the event of emergency where there's no power?
It's only used when there's no power.
Right. So at the expense of, like, I guess I'm going to be a little cynical here, we could buy a Honda generator and power up during the couple outages we have a year, or spend, do you have a value on the?
It'd be
The
approximately
solar panel.
$16,000.
Yeah.
$16,000 approximately.
In addition, may I,
Go ahead,
in
Councilor.
addition to the insurance money?
No, that is the claim value. That's all it is.
I guess, I think, and I think I mentioned this once before, I think this is a decision that we need to first decide what's our objective. Our objective isn't to produce green electricity. Our objective is to power up our facilities for a determined period of time.
Yep.
And that determined period of time is the length of a power outage. And 8 hours is clearly insufficient in my view. And I'm not sure I'd buy a Honda generator, but for $16,000 or $10,000, we could buy 10 kilowatts instead of 3. And we could run it for as long as the thing runs until it wears out, which is probably going to be many years. I was aghast at what it cost us. Was it, I can't remember the number, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 for batteries a couple of years ago. It was a huge amount of money,
$12,000.
way more than we ever would have spent for some gasoline and a generator. And I think this is the time to say, let's rein in this, what I feel is not responsible spending for something that isn't going to meet our needs. Our first need is provide power for the duration of a power outage so we can run our office. That should be our objective. And We have lots of power outages that are longer than 6 hours.
With the solar power, obviously it's different than the wind generator. I mean, it's going to be, with the technology now, with the solar panels, it will last a lot longer.
Even if you got 12 hours out of it. 3 kilowatts is a very small
Only-
amount of electricity. And I have a real problem with, I think function is the most important thing here. And let's focus on the function. What is our objective for our power? And once we've met that objective, then let's look at whether we want to do green power to solve it. But I don't want to get into a debate about what's going to last longer, gasoline or solar power.
Okay,
It's clearly solar power.
okay, thank you. I'd like to hear from others on
Sorry,
council, their thoughts on this, please. Or do we have no other thoughts?
I believe the CAO had his hand up, maybe
Yeah.
he has a
Okay,
comment.
go ahead.
Thank you. My previous position as operations in Alert Bay, I did extensive research on solar generation for a project for the village of Alert Bay, which they proceeded to move forward with. And solar power, much like wind power, will maintain power to a building through a power outage indefinitely. It's free power. It's throughout, even an overcast rainy day, the development of these panels will provide enough power to continue to run the operations as if we had regular power, like we used to with the wind generator. So I just want to make that clear that it's not 8 hours of power we would get from solar panels. It would be indefinite power as long as we have the battery bank to back us up. So I just wanted to bring that clarity to the discussion.
I know that the regional district does have solar backup and we're able to weather multi-day, was it 24, 48 hours, that one long with no problems whatsoever. For myself personally, I think I like the idea of a cleaner alternative than a generator running. That's just my personal preference. And it would be great to see us replace green for green. Anyone else? First, before you speak, Councillor Mitchell. No, okay, go ahead, Councillor Mitchell. Or sorry, Councillor Cole, apologies.
Thank you, Mayor Barron. I'd like to make a motion that we put this project on hold, just for the simple fact there's a bit of a question on what we're doing with that building. And it's a large amount of money, so my motion is to put the solar project for the town hall on hold.
Seconder for that motion? Okay.
Second.
All right. Go ahead, staff.
If I could just make a little clarification, that comment I made about the 6 hours, 8 hours of runtime, that's with no generation
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just the batteries, the reserve power, what we have in the battery bank. And number two is that because the EOC grant still has enough funding available, we're going ahead with the option to plug in that generator that's in the trailer to the building. So that will be going ahead regardless of the insurance claim. That's nothing to do with that.
Go ahead, Councillor Barron, and then Councillor Downey.
Are we actually spending any money here, or is this just the insurance money instead of Julian? Or
No,
Is-
no, as I said, Councillor Downey, this is
No,
nothing
it's
to do
Councillor
with.
Barron who's talking. I know you can't see them with masks.
Oh, hey,
Having some fun.
I was nodding that way.
Yeah, no, it's Councillor Barron who asked the question.
Apologies, Councillor Barron. Sorry.
I can't see you going,
Um,
fog it up.
But no, as
We're
I
not
as I
actually
just,
spending any money. You're just.
no, as I just
we
mentioned,
have an X amount of dollars that they're giving us for the wind turbine, and they're saying you don't have to buy another turbine. You can buy something else, or you can put the money into your budget.
we could if we took the lesser amount, correct?
Right. And you're saying for X amount of dollars, you can go and buy a bunch of solar panels that will fit into the infrastructure that are already there, that will provide power in an emergency situation, not day to day to reduce our hydro costs.
Correct.
Nice.
Councillor Downey? Over there.
Okay, so that means we're looking at a $12,000 check or $16,000 worth of material to replace it. So I'm wondering if this is the opportunity then to look at a full solar installation to run the building instead of just piecemeal again, right? I mean, that windmill was piecemeal. It looked after a certain section, but it never really generated enough power to support the whole building. But solar certainly does have that ability. So I wonder if that isn't what we should be looking at instead, is taking that 16,000, leveraging it and going all in.
Yeah. So there's a motion on the table to pause that. I would vote against that motion because I think that staff has done a lot of, has done some legwork already, and I would love to see the cost before we just put it on hold. But, any other comments before I call the question? Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
When does the decision have to be made regarding the proceeds of the insurance claim?
Anytime. It can be made anytime now. It should be
So there's
sooner than later.
When does it expire then is my question.
I don't have an expiry date, but I mean, it's sooner than later. Yep.
Okay, go ahead,
One
Councillor.
further question. If we don't put this on hold, does that mean that you're simply going to proceed and do what you want? This is just information then, and you're just going to go ahead and put in a solar system if that's what you decide. This is our one opportunity to make a decision to hold it or to do something different. Is that
Yep.
right? You're going to just proceed?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's
Okay.
why I have it in my report there, Councillor Mitchell, is that it actually does, garner some discussion about this. And if this is the council's decision to make a change, it is now. Yeah, correct.
Okay, so I'm definitely in favor of putting it on hold until we can review it. It's just more money being spent that maybe we don't have to spend. We just heard that they can plug this trailer in that we bought, or that somebody bought with a grant or whatever, and power the community, to the town office. Maybe we don't even need backup power. I don't know. I think there's more, just spending the money just because we have money doesn't make much sense to me. I think we need to have a proper plan.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor of the motion to pause the project? Is that how you phrased it? Could
I think I said put on hold.
put the project on hold?
Same, yeah.
Opposed?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
I'd like to motion that staff bring back to council their findings as to what this $16,000, what level of power and duration it will provide for us. And also, so using the existing funds, and then also bring back a scenario to use solar for the whole building.
meaning to reduce our costs, our hydro costs?
Yeah.
Are that,
Okay.
So two price points. That's my
Second that.
motion.
any discussion on that motion?
You see it on the screen?
Okay, could you bring it up on the screen, please, Connor? Thank you.
I guess my only comment, this would effectively be a pause on this project if we voted for this motion.
I would believe
One
that
would
it would
expect
come,
that.
that information would come to
Yeah.
the table before anything happens.
Yeah. and
Because
then
they're
we
very,
could
very
Yep.
different directions to attend to.
Decision if we wanted to invest a little bit more.
We just say power provided by the insurance claim funds instead of putting a dollar on it. By solar.
To reduce hydro costs, right? I think that is your ultimate
That is
aim
the
by the
goal.
second one,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So it isn't I just wanted to clarify, so it's not just so that the
Yeah.
entire building could run in a power outage, that it would
No,
actually
it
help
would-
lower our
we would-
costs. Yes, okay, thank you.
So that staff bring back a report to council.
Could we clean it up and just say that staff report to council on the power?
Provided by solar panels using the insurance funds. Provided by solar panels. Provided by solar panels. Using. I think captures it a bit better.
Yeah.
Okay,
So Counselor Downey, is the intention here we'll have like a return on investment kind of thing?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Like,
we would
could-
know.
because I think we really need to know that, like, in a lot of cases, solar payback is over a long, long time.
Yeah.
15, 20 years.
okay, any other comments before I call the question? All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, any other questions from Julian's report? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Downey.
In the, under the paragraph titled Public Works, it begins regarding December and January and the cold snap we had. Last two sentences state during the cold stretch of weather, there were many water service connections, damage leaking, which resulted in a lot of break-in work for the department. So my question is, I guess the frequency that that Public Works had to go into private homes, and did we, was that at our expense or was that at the homeowner's expense?
So this is basically referring to the fact of a lot of freezing of water services to private property. A lot of variety, like it's not all the same, like it's some of it's on our side of the curb stop, which is basically the point at which the town's responsibility ends and the homeowner's responsibility starts. Some of it has been on their side, the majority actually, but still we're responsible to actually shut off the water so they can perform the repairs. So quite often, locating the water shutoff is an issue. So sometimes it's, an issue trying to find the actual, curb stop to shut the water off so they can actually perform the repairs in the house. The curb stop actually belongs to the town, so it's our property and our responsibility to be able to shut that off.
And have I got it correct that that's what the last funding grant that we've just submitted is to be able to have those identified throughout the town? Is that one of our funding grants that we've got outstanding?
No. To locate the curb stops, I'm sorry? I don't think so.
Do we know where how to shut the water off in every home in our community? That's the
No,
question.
we absolutely do not. No, we do not. We are working towards that. If you remember in phase 7 in 2018, when I advocated quite strongly in 17, actually, beg your pardon, with previous council, that we actually incorporated changing the water service connections right to the property line, including our valves. That was my intent, so that we did well over 200, which in all the previous 6 phases were not done. Budget restraints or whatever, but it made absolute sense. And moving forward, we are doing that. We are actually making sure that we can actually find our property, which is that valve.
Mhm.
It's a big push, like, moving forward in infrastructure, for sure.
Okay, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I was just wondering, Julian, is there a charge to shut that off under these circumstances?
Yeah,
And is it charged to?
At this time, it's a nominal $50 charge to shut off the water and turn it back on. That's according to our bylaw.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Julian? Okay, receive and file then, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you, Julian. Next, we'll move on to item 7B, development cost charges. We have with us this evening Kevin Brooks with McElhaney, who is available to answer any questions that we might have on this report. So move for discussion. Seconded. All those in favor? Oh, I guess we don't vote right now. Never mind. Okay. So you've had the report before you. Questions for Kevin? What are your thoughts on this? Go ahead, Councillor Mitchell.
What comes to my mind is, what's the time frame to get it to the state where we could submit it to the government for approval? Obviously, it's not something we would be doing in-house as far as putting this together. So I'm assuming you're volunteering.
Through the mayor to Councilor Mitchell, thank you very much for the question. It's up to council on how they want to proceed with doing the work to get us. It requires a civil engineer to actually do the determination of future developable lands, and then to be able to do an assessment of what the extended services would need to be to service those. So it's a civil engineering job. And how council would choose as a civil engineer to do that research is up to council.
So I have a question for you, Kevin. I was looking through that. It seems to be a pretty complicated process, or not complicated, time
Time-consuming, certainly.
time-consuming process. We're going through our OCP. We still have to work through our zoning. And then I was reading up on development costs in a book for a guide for elected officials, and it says there are alternatives. So to capture some of those things, are there alternatives that might work for us in the meantime while we work through the OCP and the zoning that would be able to address some of the concerns that some of the councillors have had around the table?
Excellent question, Mayor Wickstrom. 100%. One of those tools you already have in place, and that tool is your subdivision and development servicing bylaw. At time of subdivision, under your subdivision development servicing bylaw, any developer must pay the frontage improvements and construct all services to service that property. What can be done at that time is, if there's deficiencies in the existing infrastructure that are found as part of a subdivision, that developer can be made to upgrade those existing services to provide capacity for that new development. So that tool is already in place, and you have that tool and authority under your existing subdivision and development servicing bylaw.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Kevin, under that scenario, would there be an assessment done to determine the infrastructure demands of the future development, or that?
Another excellent question, Councillor Cole. 100%. When a subdivision comes forward and there's suspected bottlenecks or deficiencies within infrastructure, at time of the assessment of that subdivision, at that time your approving officer would identify the need for additional assessment of capacity. Pretty much any subdivision that's done should be doing a capacity assessment of the system to confirm that you have enough water for fire protection and for fire flows, there's enough flow for your sanitary services, and how the stormwater is going to be addressed. That needs to be done at subdivision, and your subdivision development servicing bylaw already clearly articulates that that would need to be done. At that time, when that civil engineering work is done, if a deficiency is noted, then your approving officer would require, as part of for final approval, that that deficiency would need to be fixed prior to approving it. Under the legislation, under the Land Act, and under training for any approving officer, the approving officer should not approve a subdivision unless it can be fully serviced adequately by the services within the community.
Thank you.
If I may, a follow-up question, typically who pays for a study like that? And a follow-up to that is, the town owns significant land. So who would be expected to pay for that? I'm thinking the Pioneer Hill development.
Yep. So the developer pays. that is the model, that is how the bylaw is written, and that's also the policy that we've actually integrated into the draft OCP. The developer is responsible for those costs, and that is the model used right across British Columbia and Western Canada. So it's a developer pay model. As for Pioneer Hill, if the town, if it's a Pioneer Hill is a piece of fee simple land. The Pioneer Hill lands, it depends on how the town proceeds with development. If the town were to develop them themselves, you will be the developer. You will be required to look at the infrastructure, determine if the infrastructure has capacity. If you enter into a agreement with another land developer, you have the ability as the property owner to shift that responsibility onto whoever developed it. So you have a lot of flexibility with the Pioneer Hill property on how you would deal with that.
So is the development cost charge,
Mhm.
is this kind of like a Cadillac? This is like a big city kind of thing where we don't have a lot of land to develop. We have a few little parcels here and there. Is what we've got kind of going to get us through in an acceptable, so nobody's getting raked over anything kind of way, and not spend a lot of staff time or gray matter on something that's maybe a little bit pie in the sky, or like a little bit more than we need?
It's another excellent question. Development cost charges are a very effective tool, but it's a balance. And I think you hit the nail on the head somewhat. Development cost charges specifically can only be used for infrastructure that is going to support future development. So let's say you get a lot of infrastructure, you need a new well to support new development. You know, you're getting 100 new units and your capacity everywhere. That's an example. So it's for infrastructure of that kind, it cannot be used for operation maintenance or anything. It's all about future development. Right now, in Port McNeill, there is an opportunity to begin looking at establishing development cost charges. But right now, there's also a fundamental desire to have a lot more development come to town. So there's that balance that a smaller municipality like Port McNeill should look at, is at what point to do cost recovery mechanisms like development cost charges, because it become a disincentive versus a cost recovery mechanism for the town. And so that is a balance you have to play. If all of a sudden the market in Port McNeill gets to the point that you are going to see a significant amount of development, you want to have a development cost charges bylaw in place, right? But if you're going to see the sort of for the next even 5 years, the trend in development about 5 to that 10 home range that has been happening historically, a development cost charges bylaw probably does not make sense at this time. But it does not hurt to get your ducks in a row and to determine what those future infrastructure projects would be, and begin getting the costing works and things like that done out, so you can get at least the basis and foundation for a future development cost charges bylaw.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Downey?
I'm not sure if I'm on the right track here, but I was speaking with a couple of gentlemen last night at our meeting, and they made the comment that Port McNeill actually is ahead of most communities in terms of their infrastructure, because we have replaced most of our water system, our sewer. When it was built, and this is John Motherwell had shared this with me, that there is the capacity is there to expand it, that the town could actually double in size and it would support it. I don't know if that's still true or not. That's for you to determine. But Port McNeill, it would seem to me, already has a lot of the infrastructure in place. So what are the over and aboves that we would be seeking from a developer with regards to these DCCs?
That's an excellent question. So yeah, I've based on my conversations with John Sorensen, who is the civil engineer that's been doing a lot of the asset work for the town. Port McNeill is very well positioned. have very good infrastructure assets in the community, and they've been quite well maintained. And that's kudos to your public works team for the work that they have done, keeping those those assets in the condition that they are in. As for what we'd actually need, you don't really know until you actually identify, okay, these are going to be the future development lands. And this is what the demands of those future development lands are going to be and how those could potentially impact the existing system. But there's certain things that I would definitely be recommending for development cost charges bylaw for the town. One is parkland acquisition and improvement development cost charge is I think an essential, especially with the direction that came out of the official community plan with the demand and desire for improved recreational facilities. You can, as part of your development cost charges bylaw, do some forecasting on the scope and scale of improvements that you'd need for your recreational facilities, for trails, for parklands. You know, you want parklands with sports fields, things of that nature. You can do, and you can add that into your development cost charges bylaw to start getting money on all new development to put into the pot to help fund those sorts of things. So there's definitely going to be some things there. You can also integrate active transportation upgrades as part of the road component. So that was something that I'd be recommending also. How much demand is new development going to put on that road infrastructure, especially because you have an active transportation plan and a very strong OCP that speaks to active transportation in integration of that infrastructure into your road system. So there's a couple of things that would definitely need to be considered as part of the cost estimates when you're calculating those rates.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell?
I just want to jump back to my original question is what would the time frame be to produce that development cost charge bylaw? And to the point of submitting it for government approval.
At this stage, I'm unable to answer that question, Councillor Mitchell, because it's a civil engineering exercise. And because we don't know where the town would want those future development lands to be, I can't actually even provide an estimate on the scope and scale of civil works that would need to be done to actually be able to calculate the rates. From the time that the rates are actually calculated, it's a very straightforward process. And you're probably looking at probably a 3 to 4 month process to have the bylaw done, have council give it its first reading, and have the inspector of municipalities look at it. But that time to calculate the rates could be a few months and it could be 8 months. And it depends on the scope and scale of work needed to be done based on where you want to focus your future development lands.
Kevin, I have a question. You were saying, I lost my train of thought. Darn it. And it was good, I'm sure. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Just to jump back to roads for a second, Kevin, could DCC charges fix up the roads in general, or it would have to be like the road to the new development? Because our roads are out of shape and we have no reserve.
No, so the DCCs cannot be used for operations and maintenance. However, if there's a road that needed to be upgraded to facilitate additional traffic from new development, the cost of the upgraded portion could be integrated into a DCC. Right? That's the complexity of it. The 100% of it wouldn't, but you might be able to allocate 20% of that cost of upgrades to the new development, right? And so that's that nuance of calculating the DCC rates through the costing, and you have to allocate proportions of projects to new development.
But for active transportation projects, that would be different. They could fund a bike path in general for the town, even if it didn't go to that development.
No, it'd still be proportional. It'd still have to be proportional.
I remembered my question. So when I'm thinking in terms of budgeting and looking in the future, and I heard you say that perhaps at this time, it might be a step ahead to go into a development cost charges bylaw. What are some of the steps that we can do in preparation for if we all of a sudden saw things ramp up? So what could we, but I'm thinking budgetary, like what are some steps that we could do to get us to there?
Yeah, excellent question. So one of the first steps is develop where the town in the next 5 or 10 years want the future development lands to be. Right? And so Pioneer Hill, we've talked about Pioneer Hill, maybe that's one of them. Some of the CD1 zone lands, it's a very large parcel of land. So in the next 5 to 10 years, it's not going to be the whole parcel, but you could allocate a portion of that parcel, say, and determine, okay, we'll say 25% of such and such parcel will develop, 100% of that parcel. Then you have to do a density calculation from that. So that's one thing that can be done. That's a relatively straightforward process. And the next part is begin doing the assessment of the type of upgrades needed to support that form of development and that scale and density of development. Those two things would basically provide the foundation for any future DCC bylaw. Even if you had a civil team run the numbers on that now, they can quickly update those numbers for money just very, very quickly. So if you have everything in place, what you find in larger communities, they'll have what you call an eligible projects list. Those are the list of projects that make up the DCC rates. You could begin establishing your eligible projects list. And what you find when cities update their DCCs, typically all they're doing is updating the costs of their eligible project lists and knocking off the eligible projects that have already been built. So they'll remove them and then they'll update the cost to modern dollars because they're usually 5 or 10 years old. And so you need to upgrade those costs. So by getting that eligible projects list in place, you'll have the hard work done. And then when it's right, then you can pull the trigger to get your DCC bylaw in place actually relatively quickly from that point.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mayor Worksham. So in short, we could have DCCs for just Pioneer Hill, for example, and it not apply to like a new home build in, infill in a current residential area. Through Mayor Worksham, you can create area-specific DCCs, but the one thing that the inspector will look at is that they're applied fairly across all similar forms of development. So let's say you have a single family built on Pioneer Hill and you have a single family built in another area of the community. If that other single family does actually contribute to the demand on the infrastructure, it has to be treated consistently with any other building constructed. Right. So there's a fairness test that the inspector municipalities will look at. The town does have the ability to look at assist factors and things of that nature to support certain forms of development to occur. And we're getting into some of the complexities of DCC bylaws, but there are some options where, let's say you wanted multifamily buildings all built around the downtown, and you wanted to help incentivize that, you could actually reduce or provide a greater assist factor to that form of development to help incentivize that to occur in one area versus another. And so there's nuances to the strategy that you can utilize when you actually develop rates at that time. It's DCCs and they're generally quite straightforward. You're charging new development for the infrastructure that the town needs to build to support that infrastructure. But when you get into actually developing the rates and stuff like that, as you can hear, it can start getting quite complex on how you calculate those rates.
Thank you.
And so, and you're, Jen, just to wrap it up, you're saying what we have right now within our subdivision bylaw should get us what we need.
Your cost recovery mechanism in the existing subdivision and development servicing bylaw does require developers to construct the infrastructure to support their development.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
I'd like to make a motion that we go with option 2. That's on page 5 of 6 of the report, which is that council consider the information that staff prepare a draft development cost charges bylaw for council's consideration. I'd really like to see this discussion continue, and that would be a great start to see what a bylaw looks like. And we really should be discussing in our budget talks about some of these assessments, I think. if we're gung ho on developing our town land, we need to do these assessments. So I think this would be a good start. I'm hoping someone will second that motion.
Seconded? Okay. So yeah, and I've in talking with our CAO earlier, I think the motion or that option 2 was meant to just have us step back and reconsider. It wasn't, but I hear what you're saying. The only question that I'm struggling with is it was just explained that it's very complicated and that we have to do some other things. So how, I mean, we could see a sample bylaw of another community, but I don't know how we can see a draft bylaw without doing all those steps that Kevin just explained to us. And maybe Kevin, you can clarify, would that be easy to do or would it even be accurate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I would recommend if you want to understand what a DCC bylaw looks like, that we can provide you some examples of what they look like and the type of reports and background information required to support the development of a DCC bylaw. We can't develop a DCC bylaw without having the eligible projects list developed and the costing done. There's nothing to develop a bylaw around, but we can certainly provide some examples of what it looks like so you have an idea of what they look like and how you could potentially administer those for the community.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's a good first step. And the eligible projects list is the first time I've ever heard of that, but it sounds like we should have an eligible project list.
So, so then the motion would read, and if you could please bring it up for us, type it out, yeah, would read that staff return with examples.
Sure,
And-
how about staff prepare examples of development cost charges bylaws for council's consideration?
And there was a second part that Kevin, you said would be, you would also provide or would recommend providing with that?
Yeah, and to Mayor Wickstrom, it's, a lot of the newer bylaws that are being developed, they're actually producing reports, some of that background reports and stuff like that, which could be helpful information for council.
Yeah.
With reports? then?
With, yeah, background reports.
With background reports?
Staff's not preparing it, staff is providing examples.
Yeah,
Staff
provide
gathering.
examples, yeah. And it's radically different from the other, so I'm assuming you're rescinding that other motion and going with this one instead,
Yes.
because it's very different
you.
from here, yeah. So seconder for that one? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much for answering those questions for us, Kevin. Appreciate that very much.
Motion to rescind the other one, the
Or
zero.
sorry, not rescind, withdraw. Withdrawing, we don't need a motion, right? If you
No,
would-
the resolution 081-2022, because that one will still stand and we won't possibly be able to get a bylaw prepared in 45 days.
Oh, that's right.
I would
yes.
request that council rescind that resolution.
So yeah, if I can have a motion to rescind resolution, okay. Anyone opposed, are all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Okay, next we're moving to item 8A, which is our official community plan, 704-2021. We did have our public hearing last night, which was well attended. And we do have some notes given to us from staff on what people's comments were. So what's your pleasure with this one, council?
I move that we give it third reading.
A seconder for that? So discussion, go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I did note today on our town website, this plan still had the old maps. So out of proper process, I'll be voting against third reading tonight.
So I think that the maps are updated. You're referring to the agenda. On the agenda, the maps weren't updated, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Go ahead, staff.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. In speaking with our consultant, Kevin Brooks, he does recommend that we withhold the third reading until the proper package is included in the agenda, including the proper maps.
Okay. All right. So then, there you go.
Call the question.
Well, we can't. Well, he recommends it. Okay. All those in favor of third reading?
No.
Opposed? It's defeated. Are there any corrections or anything that you would like to pass along so that when that package comes back to us at the next meeting, it is, I know that there were a few formatting errors and I CC council on minor things. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring to the attention of Kevin Brooks?
Hey, Wickstrom, I'm just a little confused about the process. We're
Well, what I'm
allowed
thinking.
to receive new input, or, you know, can I say right now I want to revisit some contentious issue in the OCP, or
Well,
we're talking about
well, I
typos
mean,
or-
what I'm thinking, okay, so Kevin comes and brings us the OCP with the new maps, and then are we going to then list a number of things that would just seem prudent that if there's something worth correcting, and, you know, then we're not sitting at second reading 2 weeks from now. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So where we're at right now, having public hearing, we can do administrative amendments, such as make sure the maps are cleaned up properly, you know, spacing issues, things like that that you have you've noted, Mayor Wickstrom. Anything beyond that, content changes will trigger another public hearing. So just be aware of that. Of course, if there's content changes at this stage that you think need to be addressed, I'm not trying to deter you from that, but be aware that if you do content changes, it will trigger a second public hearing.
And if I may, if members of the community come to us, we're to disregard
Yes.
their information, it's whatever's.
Yeah, what
comes
was
forth
at
at
the
this
public
table.
hearing or whatever, if staff brought anything back from, that results from the fact that the map was incorrect.
Thank you.
You know, I'll confess at the meeting, I didn't go home and take the chief concerns were all centered around housing, and I did not go home with my notes from the meeting and consider that information in light of the OCP as it was presented. So, you know, I can't say right now whether, and I don't know if staff if they have had a chance to consider the data that was received last night and whether that changes anything within the current document that we have. I mean, it was last night, we're 24 hours later. I don't know if anybody's done that. And is it necessary?
Yeah, well, I guess what I got from last night was that it was almost that the people that were there were doing a strategic planning session for us because their concerns came out of the OCP document. We had already determined housing and I felt that their comments aligned a lot with what was in the document. That was my observation, what was already in the document. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom.
Your hand is tiny and I keep missing it, so
Thank you very
on the
much.
screen.
Through Mayor to Councillor Downey, I actually did go over the comments and look at them in the context of the document itself. We have every comment that we received last night is something that is covered in either the housing section or the land use section of the official community plan, which you know, it was nice to hear that well, either the people that showed up actually read the document or that we actually heard the community properly. Either way, the document itself, the way that is written, certainly addressed the concerns that were raised at the public hearing last night.
Thank you. That gives me comfort.
Anything else? Any other comments? Okay, so that will be tabled then till the next council meeting. Thank you very much, Kevin. Item 10A is the mayor's report. Motion to receive and file unless you've got questions.
Can I just go back and ask a question about the last one? So at our next meeting, OCP is going to come with proper maps, quote unquote. And if in the next 2 weeks, somebody sees those maps and that fundamentally changes the trail section, and they take that to staff, staff will be bringing us a report with the new OCP or with the perfect OCP. And then we would get a report that said, because the maps were wrong, these things have now come up, which could fundamentally change. And at that point, we would have to have another.
We would consider the information that we received, and then
Okay.
it is our decision as a council as a whole, whether we wanted to act on if there was decision, or if there was the information was received. If we acted on it, and then Kevin, you can confirm this, if we acted on it and it fundamentally changed the OCP, it has to go back out to public hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
So at the next meeting, we're either going to get information that's going to prompt us to go to another public hearing, or we're going to get information that doesn't change anything and we do third reading.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Wickstrom, the one question I have about the maps, I've got 2 copies of the official community plan. I didn't look through the maps to see if they're the same or not. I'm concerned that with so many packages with maps that are not accurate, is there going to be some way of notarizing, affirming, filing these maps so that we know we have the accurate maps in our system? Because every time I turn around, I get another map and it's got something else on it that wasn't supposed to be there, or something is missing. It should have been there. When we get these maps, what's going to identify them as different from the ones that are wrong?
I
'Cause
think
there's
that
so many wrong ones out there now.
I think that we could ask staff that they would just date it. And if we have the dated maps, then we know that it was from the time that we spoke about it and the changes were made.
Is that something you would do, Kevin, right on the map? Like in the map formatting?
I'd actually recommend that, as Mayor Wickstrom has suggested, that they date it. And basically you provide a date, and what you do is you provide at the beginning, you date it, so it's dated the exact same date as your actual OCP document. And you put on the bottom, consolidated for convenience purposes with a date. And then you have that on your maps also, so you can coordinate your map to the document itself, so they're dated the exact same dates, so you know they're from the exact same time.
Okay,
All right.
thanks.
I think that will solve the problem. Okay. Receive and file the mayor's report, unless anybody has questions. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, question, go ahead.
Any thoughts on the Island Health Zoom meeting, considering that we went into a hospital shutdown over the weekend?
Yeah,
Did that come up?
so, yeah, it did, which I had emailed everybody and let them know that that might be happening. And so just to back up, the Island Health meetings where we're all on them and everybody sort of, I guess slowly, because it does come up as a recurring, at least it does online through Teams. So if you want to be back on these, they're having them about once every month or 6 weeks, if you'd like to be back on. The NumGeese are still there with us. And we're still like, okay, great, we've not solved the doctor problem, but there's an Island Health Clinic, and then there's Dr. Armagon's own clinic, but we're still advocating at that table for a different model of healthcare. And this closure showed that they share resources with nurses, but they don't share resources as far as doctors go. And so when there is a hiccup, and because we have such a lean staff, we have what we had happened. So I know that Dr. Avery gave us a report and a suggestion on some ways that we could do things differently. And I think these hiccups are allowing us to continue to have that at the table and have them recognize that we have to think differently on the North Island. So I can have Island Health put you on the scheduled meetings, and you can be a part of those as well, as we were in the very beginning. I would encourage you to double check always then your calendars, because it will go into your Outlook calendar, the invites, because I forget sometimes and then it pops up.
Yeah, I don't have
Yeah.
anything at all. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know what the status was going on at the, because this here doesn't actually,
This was
doesn't give any information.
yeah.
It just says you went to a meeting.
Yeah, well,
So-
and so it was one of those perfect storm events where people, physicians, there was 2 physicians that weren't in town. One was ill, and it just left the hospital without a doctor.
Thank you, Mayor Ekstrom. Would the offering or the cottage next to the town office be helpful in this situation? Because like, there's very little we can do, I feel, but that is something we could do that might help
It
with the
it
doctor
actually
shortage.
doesn't have to do with housing. It has to do with acquiring the staff. And in the case of the hospital being shut down with the doctor, they tried and they just could not get a locum on short notice. So it didn't have anything to do with housing in this particular incident.
They have accommodations for locums, I
Yes.
assume?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, anybody else have any reports that they would like to give verbally under item 10B? Okay, if not, can I please have a motion to go in camera under section 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at the preliminary stages.
So moved.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. I don't see any media. I don't see any media online. So then motion to,
Public here.
oh, sorry. Oh, in the public. Apologies. Yeah. I just made the assumption that, yeah. No question? Any questions from the public? Okay. Motion then to adjourn and go in camera, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, everybody who came this evening.
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to find out what actually were you talking about at the meeting? Like, what's going on at